Hello, and welcome to some Dodge Family History. This is where I present information and research on my ancestors who served in the military during the early 20th century. Today, I will be presenting on the draft registration cards from World War I. In preparing this presentation, I found that presenting some of the history of Selective Service registration and conscription helps provide context for the information that is available on the World War I draft cards. In addition to some of the history behind Selective Service registration, we will look at the World War I draft registration cards, the information they contain, and how to read and understand the information contained on the World War I draft cards. Throughout the 20th century, the United States government has authorized the conscription of its citizens in order to meet the personnel demands of the military. This was done during World War I, 1917 and 1918, World War II, 1940 through 1946, Korea, with registration beginning in 1948, and Vietnam, with registration ending in 1975. Draft registration cards do not necessarily indicate that an individual served in the military. Most draft cards simply indicate that an individual registered for possible conscription into military service. However, some draft registration cards do indicate whether the registrant served in the military. Draft registration cards contain several pieces of information on the registrant, including their name, date and place of birth, place of residence at the time of registration, their occupation, marital status, next of kin, and physical description. Following America's entry into World War I on April 6, 1917, the Selective Service Act was passed into law on May 18, 1917. This law stated that all male citizens or male persons not alien enemies who have declared their intentions to become citizens between the ages of 21 and 30 are required to register for military service. The first draft registration was conducted on June 5, 1917. Additional draft registrations took place on June 5, 1918, August 24, 1918, and September 12, 1918. The September 12, 1918 draft registration was expanded to all males ages 18 to 45. In total, some 24 million men registered for the draft during World War I. Following draft registration, all registrants were then sent a questionnaire, which then they had to complete and return to their local draft board. After the questionnaire was returned to the local draft board, each registrant was then classified into several different categories from 1 to 5, with 1A being fit for military service. Many local newspapers across the country published the different classification categories for the information of the public, and many of these local newspapers are available online today. Those who were drafted for military service reported to their draft boards for induction into military service. With the armistice ending hostilities on November 11, 1918, selective service activities were curtailed, local draft boards closed their offices, and by July of 1919, all selective service activities had ended. Black and white copies of the World War I draft cards are available on several genealogy websites, including Ancestry, Family Search, and Fold3. The original World War I draft cards are available at the National Archives in Atlanta, Georgia. The accompanying classification lists are also housed at the National Archives in Atlanta, and both are available upon request. However, questionnaires completed by the registrants and other documentation relating to each World War I draft registrant no longer exist. Here is the World War I draft card for my great-grandfather, James Robert Dodge, from June 5, 1917. The draft card gives his name, age, home address, date and place of birth, citizenship status, occupation, employer, dependent family members, marital status, race, any previous military service, and whether any exemptions were claimed. While my great-grandfather claimed that his parents were dependent on him for their support, he did not claim this as grounds for an exemption from being inducted into military service. The back of the draft card indicates his height and build as tall and slender. Future draft cards would indicate the registrant's specific height and weight. The back of the draft card also lists his eye color, hair color, whether he was bald, and if he had any physical disabilities. The draft card then has the registrar's signature, the precinct, city or county and state of the registrant, and the date of registration. There are a few numbers at the top of the draft card that I will now talk about. The number at the top right corner of the card is his registration number, number 26. This number would have appeared on a card called the registration certificate, which would have been issued by the local draft board and given to the registrant following registration. The two numbers at the top left corner of the card are his serial number, number 177, and his order number, number 724. The serial number was given to my great-grandpa following his registration for the draft. It appears that the serial number was assigned alphabetically, as his brother, Dwight Hector Dodge, had serial number 176. The serial number is what was used in the draft lottery, which took place on July 20th, 1917. 10,500 serial numbers were drawn in this lottery, with each serial number being matched up to an order number. The order number indicates that my great-grandpa would be the 724th person called for physical examination to determine fitness for induction into military service. The Salida Mail newspaper from Salida, Colorado, published the results of the draft lottery on August 3, 1917. On the back of the draft card is stamped the following combination of numbers and letters: 515A. The first number, 5, represents the state, Colorado, where the registration took place. The second number, 1, represents the district board number, and the third number, 5, represents the local board number. The letter A indicates that this was the first draft registration. As mentioned earlier, following registration for the draft, questionnaires were then mailed out to each of the registrants. The Hutchinson News, a newspaper published in Hutchinson, Kansas, printed the entire questionnaire, as well as the different classification categories, from November 22nd through November 29th, 1917, shown here. Each registrant had to give their name, age, address, name of a close relative, information on their occupation and employment, whether they had any criminal convictions, their height and weight, overall physical condition, and had to indicate whether the registrant was a legislative, executive, or judicial officer, or if the registrant was a religious minister or divinity student, or if they were currently serving in the military. The registrant also had to include their citizenship status, if they were employed in any capacity for the United States, if they were a conscientious objector, their marital status, if they had any dependents, such as a wife, children under 16, or aged and infirm parents, and how much it cost to support their dependents, information on income and property owned, and if they were involved in any industrial or agricultural occupation. The registrant would then return the completed questionnaire to the local draft board. Each local draft board tracked each registrant on the classification list. Here is the classification list for my great-grandfather. The questionnaire that we previously talked about was mailed to him on January 8, 1918, and a completed questionnaire was received by the local draft board on January 14th. Based on the responses provided in his questionnaire, he was classified as 1A, single man without dependent relatives. The notice of this classification was mailed to him on January 15th. Notice was then sent to him to appear for a physical examination on January 31st. He appeared for physical examination on February 6th, and the results of the physical examination were mailed to him that same day, indicating that he was found fit for military service. The classification list indicates that he was to report for induction on July 22, 1918. However, this date was changed to August 3, 1918. He reported for induction on August 6, 1918, and was accepted for military service on August 7, 1918. In addition to the classification list, many local newspapers published draft orders that came from the local draft boards. The Salida Record newspaper from June 28, 1918, indicated that my great-grandpa was to be inducted on July 22, 1918, for military service. However, for reasons unknown, his induction date was changed to August 3, 1918. He reported to the local draft board for induction on August 6, 1918. He was accepted for military service at the mobilization camp at Fort Logan, Colorado on August 7, 1918. From there, he was transported to Camp MacArthur, Texas for basic training. On September 23, 1918, he then boarded the troop ship USS President Grant at Hoboken, New Jersey, and arrived at Saint-Nazaire, France on October 7, 1918. Following completion of basic training in France, my great-grandfather was assigned to Company F, 9th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Infantry Division. He was among the first occupying forces to enter Germany after the armistice, and remained there until July of 1919, when he returned to the United States aboard the USS Princess Matoika, arriving in New York on August 1, 1919. My great-grandfather was honorably discharged from the Army at Fort D.A. Russell, Wyoming on August 16, 1919. There were 3 different selective service registrations that took place during World War I. The first registration was on June 5, 1917. The second registration took place on June 5, 1918, and was supplemented on August 24, 1918, and the third registration took place on September 12, 1918. The third Selective Service registration required all men between the ages of 18 and 45 to register. Here is the World War I draft card for John Edward Dodge, my great-great-uncle. This draft card lists his name, home address, age, date of birth, race, citizenship status, occupation, employer, the name and address of his nearest relatives, and his signature. This draft card asks for the names of his nearest relatives, while the draft cards from 1917 did not ask for this specific piece of information. The draft lottery for the third draft registration began on September 30, 1918. On the front of his draft card are the serial number, 470, and the order number, A0371. The back of his draft card also asks for his height, build, eye color, hair color, and any physical disabilities. Also on the draft card is stamped the following, 515C. The first number, again, represents the state of Colorado. The second number, again, represents the district board number. And the third number, again, represents the local board number. The letter C indicates that this was the third draft registration. The classification ledger indicates that the questionnaire was mailed to him on September 19, 1918, and returned to the local draft board on September 26th. He was classified as 1E, which is an unskilled farm laborer. He was mailed notice of this classification the next day, the 27th of September. With the ending of hostilities and signing of the armistice on November 11th, no further action was taken by the local draft board. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation and found it informative. More than 24 million men registered for the draft during World War I, with approximately 2.8 million men being drafted into military service. World War I draft cards are a sometimes overlooked vital record for these registrants. Many World War I draft registrants did not have birth certificates recorded at the time they were born, so their draft cards are among the earliest verifiable records of their birth, as their birth information is given by them and affirmed by their signature. The next presentation will look at draft cards from World War II. Thank you.